Hello all, my name is Fahim, and as in the previous seminar videos that I did, I have been studying about operating systems in my free time, right? So now I'll be talking about operating systems still, but today I'll be talking about operating system services. So I talked about in the previous videos that the operating system is like an interface between the user and the system, right? So it's like a translator for whatever we do, and the computer does not understand what, for example, a click means, or what typing the letter A on the keyboard means, right? The operating system is what translates this so that our computer actually understands this, right? So that's one of the service that operating system does actually. And the operating system does many more services, and today I'll be talking about all of these and what they are, and I'll explain about what each one is. So the first one is the user interface, right? The first thing that we see when we open up the computer is something called the graphical user interface. The graphical user interface is what most people usually use. It's like all of the buttons and icons, and when you click the Chrome icon, the browser opens up, right? So that's the graphical user interface. It's all about using your mouse and clicking on things. That's the graphical user interface. Then there's the command line interfaces. These are what are used by a lot of programmers, and if you want to do something that is pretty low level, so things like manipulating how your system is and changing something that is kernel related, so for doing things like that, there's the command line interface. And in different operating systems, the command line interface can be accessed in different ways. So in Windows we have the CMD, or the command prompt, and there's also PowerShell that we can use on Windows, and in Mac OS there's also a terminal. And in when coming to Linux, it's everything in Linux is about terminal. So there are a lot of terminals that we can use. These are called emulators, if I remember correctly. So things like there's the Bone shell and Bone Again shell, that is one of the most popular ones, called Bash Bone Again shell. And there's also terminals called ZSH, and basically all of these do the same thing, even though they have small differences. It's a command line interface. So it's like, if you learn how to use a command line, then it's like you will not be using the graphical interface much more. So that is one of the a good thing to learn, a skill to have, is to become better command line interfaces. I'm staying away from the topic, so I'll get back to topic. So the first thing is the service that is provided by operating system is user interface. The next one is program execution. So an operating system should be able to execute programs in its memory. So it should be able to load the programs into memory and actually execute it. And the next service that is provided by operating system is IO operations. So this is what I talked about in the beginning. I talked about how when we do something like using the mouse as a pointer, the operating system is what actually translates this for our system to understand. So it takes in data from the user through the input devices. So input devices are things like the keyboard, the mouse, and the camera, and it translates this message to the operating system, and the operating system will then talk back to the user in some way using the output devices. So in the case of a camera, I'm giving in my video through the camera, and the operating system translates this to the system, and the system understands that it should be displaying a video on the screen. So this monitor, which is an output device, shows the video that the camera is taking to me. So that's how the operating system translates things from the input device to the output device, right? And the fourth service that an operating system provides is file system manipulation. So just like the name says, it's about everything is about this is files, right? There are a lot of files and directories in our system, and we should be able to create new files, update old files, and delete files, and we should be also able to search files, right? And there are also permissions that we want to set on some files. So if we have multiple users in our system, then we don't want all users to be able to access all of the files. So if you are the main or the root user, then you should be able to restrict access to some files, so that you can control what file is accessible by different users. So that is file system manipulation. Then we have communications. This is about processes. I talked about this, I think, in the previous video. So a process is a system of its own. Not a system, it's like independent of everything else in the system. So a process that is running does not interfere with another process, but they still might need to communicate with each other, right? So the operating system is what facilitates this, and it provides processes to talk to each other. So this can be in two ways. It can either be like the process is in the same computer and they are talking to each other, but it can also be processes that are in different computers. The operating system of these computers coordinate together so that these processes can talk to each other. So that is about communication. And one important service that is provided by the operating system is error detection. So when something goes wrong, and something will eventually go wrong when you're using a system, the operating system should be able to handle that error, right? And it should not just completely crash. And one example that the resource I was referring for this video gave is that in the case of a printer, let's say you have a printer connected to your computer and the paper runs out, right? So that's an error case. So our operating system should be able to understand what happened, and at the same time it should not break the whole system. It should be able to handle that error in a graceful manner. So in the case of this, it would be like giving out an error message on the user screen telling that the paper is out and please refill. So because of this error detection, the operating system is able to handle errors while at the same time the other parts of the system are still running and there is no issues there, right? So that is error detection service that is provided by operating system. Then we also have resource allocation. So there are a lot of resources in our computer, right? For example, we have a lot of devices, the mouse and the keyboard. All of these devices are a resource, and then there's also things like the memory and then the CPU, and also the files inside your system are resources. And the OS does resource allocation so that it decides what all processes get what all resources and which user gets which resource, and it makes sure that one process is not using a resource for too long so that other processes are not able to use that. It's a very important thing that the operating system does. So that's some of the services that are provided by operating systems. I hope you learned something. Thank you.